backyard barbecue in a quiet American suburb fell silent as Chloe Mercer stepped forward, smiling as if she owned the moment. In front of neighbors and colleagues, she adjusted Bridget Ross's posture with a firm hand, her voice low but cutting, correcting her like an object out of place. Laughter flickered, then died. Jayden Ross stood beside them, watching, saying nothing. Bridget did not resist. She did not speak. She only looked at Chloe, calm, steady, almost patient, as if the moment had already passed somewhere Chloe could not see. If you believe silence can carry power, stay with this story. Tell me where you're watching from and your local time, and if you value dignity over noise, consider subscribing. The house on Alder Creek Drive had always been quiet in a way that suggested intention rather than absence. It was not the kind of silence that came from neglect. It was structured, deliberate, and held together by someone who understood how to control a space without filling it. Bridget Ross had built that rhythm long before anyone noticed it. At 35, Bridget moved through her own home, with the same economy she applied to everything else. She did not rush and she did not linger. Each action carried purpose, even when it looked like routine. The coffee brewed at exactly the same time every morning. The blinds opened in measured increments, letting in just enough light to define the room without exposing it. Her phone rested face down on the kitchen counter unless she needed it. Her world was not chaotic. It was observed. Her profession, if asked casually, was easy to misunderstand. She described it as performance training, consulting a phrase that sounded broad enough to discourage follow-up questions. It suggested corporate workshops, perhaps executive coaching, something benign and vaguely technical. Bridget never corrected the assumption. She did not offer details. She did not need to. What people noticed instead was her composure. She listened more than she spoke. She held eye contact just long enough to register attention, then released it without discomfort. When conversations shifted, she tracked them without interruption, as if mapping patterns that others did not realize they were revealing. It made some people uneasy, though they rarely knew why. Jayden Ross had once admired that about her. In the early years of their marriage, he had described Bridget as steady, grounded, reliable in a way that made everything else in his life easier to manage. He was a man who moved quickly, who built connections and leveraged them, who understood the value of timing in business and in social circles. Bridget had been at the time a counterbalance. She did not compete for attention. She did not complicate his ambitions. She made space for them. But admiration, when left unattended, tends to evolve into assumption. Jayden was now 38, operating at a level of success that allowed him to believe his instincts were always correct. His business, a mid-sized consulting firm that specialized in corporate restructuring, had grown steadily over the past 5 years. He understood negotiation. He understood leverage. More importantly, he believed he understood people. That belief extended into his home at some point without a single defining moment. Jayden had begun to see Bridget's quiet as passivity. Her restraint became in his mind a lack of awareness. The same composure he once respected now read to him as distance. And distance, he concluded, meant disengagement. He did not say this out loud. He did not need to. It showed in smaller ways. He stopped explaining his schedule. Where he once mentioned late meetings or last-minute client dinners, he now offered generalities. Work ran long. Something came up. His tone suggested that details were unnecessary. Bridget did not ask for them. He started taking calls in other rooms. At first, it was subtle. A step into the hallway. A closed door during what he described as confidential conversations. Over time, the pattern solidified. His phone was no longer an object that existed openly between them. It became something he managed separately, something that moved with him rather than resting within shared space. Bridget noticed. She noticed the slight change in the way he angled his screen when messages appeared. She noticed the pauses before he responded to certain notifications, as if calculating the right moment. She noticed that his tone shifted just slightly when he said certain names. She did not confront him. Instead, she adjusted. Observation to Bridget was not passive. It was active, structured, and cumulative. She did not need a single piece of evidence to confirm a suspicion. She needed a pattern. Patterns required time. On a Tuesday evening in early spring, Jayden arrived home later than usual. The sky outside had already shifted into that muted blue that comes just before full darkness, and the house lights were on steady and warm. Bridget was at the dining table, a laptop open in front of her, though her hands were still. "You're up late," Jayden said, placing his keys in the same bowl he always used. "So are you," Bridget replied, her voice even. He smiled, but it was the kind of expression that ended quickly. Client dinner. Ran longer than expected. She nodded once. Not agreement, not acceptance, just acknowledgement. There was a faint vibration from his phone still in his hand. He glanced at it, then turned the screen away slightly before setting it down on the counter. Bridget's eyes moved once briefly, then returned to the laptop. The moment passed. Dinner, when they shared it, had become quieter over the past months. Conversations stayed on the surface. Logistics, schedules, occasional mentions of mutual acquaintances. There were no arguments. There were no direct conflicts. But there was also no effort to repair what had shifted. Jayden interpreted the absence of conflict as stability. Bridget did not interpret it at all. She recorded it. Later that night, after Jayden had gone to bed, Bridget remained in the living room. The house had settled into its nighttime stillness, the kind that made small sounds more noticeable. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint movement of air through the vents, the distant passing of a car outside. Her laptop screen displayed a calendar, not her own. She had not accessed anything she was not permitted to see. Not yet. But she had begun aligning what Jayden said with what he did. His claimed meetings, his actual arrival times, the frequency of late evenings, the repetition of certain days, Tuesday, Thursday, occasionally Saturday. Consistency. She opened a document and typed a single line. Pattern emerging, no confrontation, continue observation. The words were not emotional. They were procedural. Bridget did not assume guilt. She did not assign motive prematurely. She allowed the data to build. In the weeks that followed, the pattern did not break. It refined itself. Jayden's absences became more predictable, his phone behavior more controlled. There were names that appeared more frequently in passing references, colleagues, he said. People from work. One name in particular surfaced just enough to register, Chloe. It came up once during a brief mention of a new client pitch. Again, in a comment about a successful presentation. Each time the context was professional. Each time Jayden's tone carried a slight shift, subtle but distinct enough for Bridget to note. She did not react. Instead, she added another line to her document. Name Chloe. Frequency increasing. Monitor. There were no accusations, no questions, no visible changes in her behavior toward Jayden. She continued as she always had, structured mornings, measured conversations, controlled space. But internally the framework had shifted. Bridget was no longer observing a marriage. She was observing a system under stress. And systems, when observed long enough, reveal their points of failure. Jayden, confident in his understanding of the situation, did not notice the shift. To him, Bridget remained the same quiet, composed, disengaged from whatever he believed was no longer relevant to her. He did not consider that her silence might contain direction. He did not consider that she might already be ahead of him. In his world, control was visible. It was expressed through decisions, through statements, through action that could be seen and acknowledged. Bridget's version of control did not require visibility. It required patience. And patience, once established, does not announce itself. It waits. Chloe Mercer did not enter spaces quietly. Even when she said very little, there was a deliberate awareness in the way she positioned herself close enough to be noticed far enough to appear uninvited by circumstance rather than intention. She understood visibility, and more importantly, she understood how to control it. At 32, Chloe had built her career in a fast-moving marketing firm, where perception was often more valuable than substance. She knew how to present confidence before it was fully earned, how to align herself with the right people at the right time, and how to make her presence feel inevitable rather than imposed. It was not a skill she questioned. It was simply how she moved through the world. She met Jayden Ross in a conference room that smelled faintly of polished wood and overused air conditioning. The meeting had been routine on paper, a restructuring proposal for a mid-tier client, but Chloe had arrived prepared to turn routine into opportunity. Jayden noticed her before she spoke, not because she was the loudest in the room, but because she was the most precise. Her comments did not fill space. They redirected it. When she challenged a point, she did so without hesitation, but also without unnecessary aggression. It was controlled, calculated, and effective. After the meeting, she did not linger. She gathered her materials, acknowledged a few colleagues, and left with the same composure she had entered with. It was Jayden who initiated the follow-up. The first email was professional, a brief note of appreciation, a suggestion to collaborate on future projects. Chloe responded within the hour. The second exchange carried a slight shift, a comment that extended beyond the immediate work, a question that invited a longer answer. The tone remained appropriate, but the boundary had moved. By the third interaction, the pattern had established itself. Jayden justified the communication easily. Collaboration required conversation. Conversation required availability. There was nothing inappropriate in efficiency. Chloe, for her part, did not challenge the framing. She allowed it to stand. Their meetings became more frequent. What began as scheduled discussions in conference rooms shifted into shorter, less formal interactions. Coffee breaks that extended a few minutes longer than necessary. Quick check-ins that did not always require a follow-up. The transition was gradual, almost unremarkable when viewed in isolation. But patterns, when viewed collectively, rarely remain subtle. Chloe noticed when Jayden stopped mentioning his wife. It was not immediate. At first, Bridget existed in passing references, a casual mention of dinner plans, a comment about the house, nothing personal, nothing detailed. Then over time, those references diminished, not replaced, simply absent. Chloe did not ask about it. She did not need to. Instead, she adjusted her own positioning. She leaned slightly closer during conversations, held eye contact a fraction longer, introduced small personal details about herself, not enough to demand reciprocation, but enough to create imbalance. Jayden responded. By the time he suggested meeting outside of work, the decision felt mutual, though neither of them had explicitly acknowledged it. The first dinner was framed as convenience, a place near the office, a discussion that extended beyond scheduled hours. The second was easier to justify. The third required no justification at all. Chloe understood the progression. She had navigated similar dynamics before, though not always with the same outcome. What made this different was Jayden's confidence. He did not behave like someone hiding something fragile. He behaved like someone certain of his position. That certainty made him predictable. And predictability to Chloe was an advantage. Weeks later, Chloe encountered Bridget Ross for the first time. It happened in a setting that offered plausible deniability, a small networking event hosted by one of Jayden's business contacts. the kind of gathering where professional lines blurred just enough to allow personal interactions without direct explanation. Bridget stood near the edge of the room, not isolated but not integrated either. She held a glass she did not drink from her posture, relaxed her gaze steady. She was not scanning the room for attention. She was observing it. Chloe recognized her immediately. Not from photographs. Jayden had never shown any. But from the absence of uncertainty. There was no hesitation in Bridget's presence, no visible effort to belong. She simply existed within the space, unaffected by it. Chloe approached. "Bridget, right?" she said, her tone warm, practiced. Bridget turned her head slightly, meeting Chloe's eyes without surprise. "Yes, I've heard about you." Chloe continued extending her hand. Bridget accepted the gesture, her grip firm but brief. "That suggests we have a mutual connection." Chloe smiled. "Jayden speaks highly of you." The statement was designed to test, to observe reaction, to establish a baseline. Bridget's expression did not change. "He's generous in his descriptions." There was no edge in her voice, no defensiveness, just a statement that neither confirmed nor denied the implication. Chloe adjusted. "I've been working with him recently," she added, as if clarifying context. "I'm aware," Bridget replied. The conversation did not escalate. It did not deepen. It remained within the boundaries of politeness, but the tension existed beneath it, unacknowledged and steady. Chloe found that more interesting than confrontation. Over the next few interactions, she made it a point to encounter Bridget again. Not directly, not in ways that would raise questions, but through overlapping spaces. Events. Brief visits to the office. Situations that allowed for casual contact. Each time she introduced small variations, a comment that lingered a fraction too long, a glance toward Jayden that suggested familiarity, a reference to shared experiences framed as professional but delivered with subtle implication. She was not reckless. She did not expose the full truth. She revealed just enough to create discomfort. Bridget did not react. She listened. She observed. She responded when necessary, but never beyond what was required to maintain the surface of the interaction. Internally, she adjusted her documentation. Chloe Mercer. Direct contact initiated. Behavior consistent with boundary testing. Escalation likely. Bridget did not rely on memory alone. After each encounter, she recorded details. Time, location, phrasing. Not as narrative, but as data. Patterns began to form not only in Chloe's behavior, but in Jayden's responses to it. He became more attentive to Chloe in shared spaces, more aware of her presence. His posture shifted subtly when she entered a room. His focus redirected, even when conversations did not involve her directly. These were not actions he would have recognized in himself. They were, however, actions Bridget could measure. One evening, as Bridget reviewed her notes, her phone screen illuminated with a notification. An unknown number. The message was brief. "You seem very composed. I wonder how long that lasts." There was no name attached, no direct reference. But the timing, combined with the phrasing, left little ambiguity. Bridget read it once, then again. She did not respond. Instead, she took a screenshot, saved the number, added a new entry. Unsolicited contact. Tone probing. Intent provoke reaction. She placed the phone face down on the table and returned to her notes. Across town, Chloe waited. She had expected a response. Not necessarily immediate, but something. Silence to her suggested hesitation or calculation. She considered both possibilities. What she did not consider was that Bridget's silence was neither. It was selection. Bridget chose when to engage. More importantly, she chose when not to. Chloe interpreted the absence of response as space to move forward. And she did. Each step she took felt to her like progress, like control being established layer by layer. She did not see the structure forming around her actions the way each choice contributed to something larger than the moment itself. Jayden, positioned between them, remained unaware of the full scope of what was unfolding. He believed he was managing two separate dynamics, a marriage that had grown distant and a connection that was becoming more immediate. He did not recognize that both were being observed under the same lens. Bridget did not intervene. Not yet. Because intervention without completion creates noise. And Bridget had no interest in noise. She was building something quieter, something that required precision. And precision, once achieved, does not need to announce itself to be effective. It only needs to arrive. The message from the unknown number did not repeat the next day, nor the day after. It did not need to. Its purpose had already been served, not in provoking Bridget, but in confirming something Chloe likely did not realize she had revealed. Direct contact without context was not impulsive. It was a probe, a test for weakness, for reaction, for fracture. Bridget had seen variations of it before in environments far less forgiving than a suburban network of polite professionals. The tactic relied on one assumption, that the recipient would respond emotionally, even if only to deny. Bridget did not deny. She archived. 3 days later, a second message arrived. Still composed, I see. The tone had shifted slightly. Less curiosity, more assertion. Chloe was adjusting her approach based on silence, interpreting it as either resistance or indifference. Both required escalation. Bridget read the message once, then saved it alongside the first. She labeled both with timestamps, stored them in a folder already designated for correspondence. There was no rush in her movements, no visible change in her routine. The coffee still brewed at the same hour, the blinds still open to the same angle. Her world did not respond to disruption. It absorbed it. Jayden, meanwhile, moved through his days with increasing certainty. The absence of confrontation at home had solidified his assumptions. Bridget's silence in his mind confirmed disengagement. If she had noticed anything, she would have said something. If she had concerns, she would have raised them. The lack of response, therefore, meant there was nothing to address. It was a conclusion built on incomplete observation. On a Thursday evening, Jayden mentioned a dinner. Not a suggestion, not an invitation, a statement. "A client wants to meet," he said, loosening his tie as he stepped into the kitchen. "It'll run late." Bridget nodded. Understood. There was a pause, brief but measurable. "You don't need details," he added, as if offering them out of courtesy rather than necessity. "If they're relevant, you'll provide them," Bridget replied. Her tone was neutral. It did not challenge. It did not encourage. It simply established a boundary that Jayden did not recognize as one. He gave a short nod, satisfied. Right. The conversation ended there. Later that evening, as Jayden prepared to leave, his phone vibrated against the counter. The screen lit up briefly, angled just enough for a name to appear before he turned it away. Chloe. The motion was quick, practiced. Bridget's eyes moved once, tracking the reflection in the polished surface of the counter rather than the screen itself. It was a habit she had developed long before this situation, observing indirectly, gathering information without signaling intent. Jayden slipped the phone into his pocket. "I'll be back late." "I'll be asleep," Bridget said. There was no implication in her words, no expectation attached to his return. It was a statement of fact. He left without another comment. The house settled into its evening rhythm. Bridget moved through the rooms with the same measured pace, turning off lights, adjusting locks, ensuring the environment remained controlled. When she reached the living room, she paused not out of hesitation, but to consider. Then she acted, her laptop open to a secure folder. Within it, a structured archive had begun to take shape. Not a collection of random files, but a system. Financial records, screenshots, notes categorized by date and relevance. The two messages from the unknown number now sat within a section labeled External Contact. She added a new entry. Second message received. Tone escalation. No response given. Pattern consistent with pressure testing. Her fingers moved steadily across the keyboard, documenting without interpretation beyond what could be supported. She did not assign motive where evidence had not yet confirmed it. She allowed the pattern to speak. Minutes later, her phone vibrated again. This time, the message was longer. You really don't see what's happening, do you? Or maybe you do, and you just don't know what to do about it. Bridget read it in full, then again parsing not the words themselves, but the structure. The phrasing suggested confidence, not doubt. Chloe was no longer testing for awareness. She was asserting superiority. Bridget saved the message. She did not respond. Across town, Chloe sat at a table that overlooked a dimly lit street, her glass untouched. Jayden was speaking, outlining something related to a potential client. His tone animated, his gestures controlled. He believed he was holding Chloe's attention. In part he was. But a portion of Chloe's focus remained on her phone waiting. She doesn't say much, does she? Chloe asked, interrupting Jayden's explanation with a casual shift in topic. Jayden paused, recalibrating. Bridget, Chloe nodded. I've noticed. She's always been like that, he replied. Quiet, keeps to herself. Chloe tilted her head slightly as if considering the information. Well, that can mean a lot of things. It doesn't in this case, Jayden said, dismissive. She's not involved in this part of my life. The statement was definitive. It carried the weight of assumption. Chloe smiled, but there was a subtle tightening at the edges. People who don't speak often see more than they let on. Jayden waved the thought away. Not her. The certainty in his voice was untested. Chloe did not challenge it directly. She simply stored it, adjusting her approach accordingly. If Bridget was as unaware as Jayden believed, then escalation could be more direct, more visible. If, however, Bridget was observing, then the lack of response required a different strategy, one that forced engagement. Either way, Chloe intended to move forward. Back at the house on Alder Creek Drive, Bridget closed her laptop and sat in the quiet for a moment longer than usual. Not to reflect emotionally, but to assess. The pattern had evolved. Initial contact indirect, second phase probing messages, current phase direct challenge. The trajectory was clear. Escalation. Bridget stood moved to the window and looked out at the darkened street. There was no activity, no movement beyond the occasional passing car. The environment remained unchanged. Inside, however, the structure had shifted further. She returned to the table, reopened the laptop, and created a new category within her archive. Behavioral Escalation, Mercer Chloe. Within it, she outlined the progression, not as a narrative, but as a sequence of actions. Each step documented each interaction placed within context. This was not about emotion. It was about preparation. Jayden returned well past midnight. The house was dark, the lights off, as Bridget had indicated. He moved quietly, not out of consideration, but out of habit. There was no need to wake someone who, in his mind, was no longer engaged in his movements. He did not check the living room. He did not consider what might have been happening there in his absence. He went upstairs unaware that the system he believed he controlled had already been mapped. The following evening, Bridget received another message. Different tone, shorter. We should talk. It was no longer a test. It was an attempt to initiate direct interaction. Bridget read it, then set the phone down. For the first time, she considered response, not because she felt compelled to engage, but because engagement at the right moment could serve a purpose. She did not type immediately. She allowed the message to exist without answer, creating space not for hesitation, but for timing. Timing, once chosen correctly, changes the structure of an interaction. And Bridget did not intend to enter any interaction without structure. Across the city, Chloe waited again, less patient this time. Silence, she was beginning to realize, was not as simple as she had assumed. It was not absence. It was control. And control, when not understood, tends to be underestimated. Bridget did not underestimate anything. She simply waited. The first time Bridget opened the joint account records after months of quiet observation, she did not begin with suspicion. She began with structure. Financial behavior, unlike conversation, did not rely on tone or interpretation. It moved in numbers, timestamps, and repetition. It revealed intention without needing to declare it. Bridget understood that well enough to avoid looking for anything dramatic. She was looking for consistency. The account itself was ordinary on the surface. Monthly deposits aligned with Jayden's income. Routine expenses followed predictable patterns: mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries. There was nothing inherently irregular in the baseline. The deviation appeared gradually, a charge for a boutique hotel downtown on a Thursday evening. Not unusual on its own. Jayden met clients often. Travel expenses were part of his routine, but the timing aligned with one of the evenings he had described as a late client dinner. Bridget did not react. She noted the transaction, recorded the date, and moved on. 3 days later, another charge appeared. Different location, similar category, same time frame. She added a second entry. By the end of the week, the pattern had enough repetition to form a structure: hotel, restaurant, transportation. Each transaction aligned with days Jayden had been absent. Each carried a level of expense that exceeded typical business meetings, though not so excessive as to draw immediate attention from someone not looking closely. Bridget was looking closely. She opened a separate document and began organizing the data. Not as a list, but as a timeline. Dates aligned with statements. Statements aligned with her own records of Jayden's verbal explanations. The overlap was not perfect, but it did not need to be. It was consistent enough. She did not confront him. Instead, she expanded her scope. The credit card statements revealed additional details: purchases that did not align with shared needs, jewelry from a store Bridget had never visited, clothing from boutiques that did not match her style, receipts for services that suggested preparation rather than necessity. Each item was small in isolation. Together they formed a narrative. Bridget did not label it as such. She labeled it as evidence. Screenshot, save, backup. Her process remained unchanged regardless of the content. There was no deviation in her pacing, no acceleration driven by emotion. The system absorbed new information the same way it had absorbed everything else methodically. One evening, while reviewing a series of transactions, she noticed a detail that shifted the framework slightly. A recurring payment. Not large, not immediately obvious, but regular. Every 2 weeks, a transfer to an account that was not joint, not business-related, and not previously documented within their shared financial structure. Bridget traced it back 3 months. The consistency suggested intention. Not a one-time decision, but a maintained arrangement. She recorded the account identifier, then paused. Tracing further would require a different level of access. Not illegal, not intrusive beyond what she was already entitled to as a co-holder of the account, but it would move the process into a more defined stage. Bridget considered it, then proceeded. The transfer details provided limited direct information, but enough to establish linkage. The recipient account connected to a financial institution she recognized. From there, it was a matter of aligning known data points, name not listed directly, but the timing of transfers aligned with known interactions. Chloe Mercer. Bridget did not write the name immediately. She cross-referenced dates, messages, Jayden's absences, Chloe's appearances. The alignment was precise. She entered the name. The document expanded. Financial relationship established. Pattern consistent with ongoing support. There was no judgment in the phrasing, no emotional annotation, only classification. The following morning, Bridget adjusted her routine slightly, not outwardly. The coffee still brewed at the same time. The blinds still open to the same angle. But her internal schedule shifted. She began allocating specific blocks of time to financial review. Not continuous, not obsessive. Structured, contained. She understood the importance of distance. Too much focus risked introducing bias. She needed clarity. Jayden did not notice the shift. He moved through the house as he always had, confident in the stability he believed existed. His phone remained close. His explanations remained general. The system, from his perspective, functioned without disruption. On a Saturday afternoon, he mentioned a purchase. "I picked up something for a client," he said, placing a small box on the counter. "Needed it for a meeting next week." Bridget glanced at it briefly. The packaging was familiar, the same store that had appeared in the statements. "Was it effective?" she asked. What? Jayden frowned. "The purchase," Bridget clarified. "Did it achieve what you intended?" He hesitated, then shrugged. "I assume it will." She nodded once. Then it served its purpose. There was no accusation in her tone, no indication that she recognized the inconsistency. The conversation ended there. Later that evening, Bridget accessed the transaction record associated with the purchase. The timestamp did not align with any scheduled client meeting. The location matched a boutique she had already documented. She added it to the file. Discrepancy confirmed. Verbal explanation inconsistent with financial record. The system continued to build. That same night, another message arrived from the unknown number. Still pretending. The phrasing had shifted again. Less probing, more direct. Chloe's patience was narrowing. Bridget read the message, then set the phone aside without immediate action. Her attention returned to the financial data. Emotional pressure, when introduced into a structured process, often disrupts clarity. Bridget did not allow that. Instead, she completed her review for the day, updated her records, secured backups across multiple locations. Only then did she return to the message. She opened a new note. External pressure increasing. Maintain non-engagement until objective reached. The objective, though not explicitly stated, had already taken shape. Completion. Not confrontation, not reaction. Completion. Across the city, Chloe interpreted the silence differently. To her, the absence of response suggested denial or fear. Both implied weakness. She adjusted accordingly. The next step would not be indirect. It would be visible. Bridget, reviewing her notes, anticipated that shift. Patterns once established tend to follow predictable paths. Chloe had moved from subtlety to direct contact. The next logical escalation involved public interaction. Bridget did not resist the progression. She prepared for it. Her focus returned to the financial records one final time that evening. She reviewed the timeline from beginning to present, ensuring consistency across all entries. There were no gaps, no missing links. The structure held. She closed the laptop not with satisfaction, but with completion of a phase. Financial documentation sufficient for preliminary action. The process would move forward. Upstairs, Jayden remained unaware of the extent of what had been assembled beneath his own roof. He believed his actions existed in separate compartments, work, personal, private. He did not consider that those compartments could be aligned externally. Bridget had aligned them, not through confrontation, not through assumption, through observation, and now through documentation. The system was no longer forming, it was established. Chloe Mercer chose a place that suggested neutrality, but carried control in its details. A cafe on the edge of the business district, quiet between lunch and evening traffic, with tables spaced far enough apart to create privacy without isolation. It was the kind of setting where a conversation could appear incidental to anyone watching, yet remain contained for those involved. She sent the message at 10:12 a.m. We should talk. Today, 2 p.m., Elman Parker. There was no greeting, no question. It was not framed as a request. Bridget read it at 10:16. She did not respond immediately. The phone remained face down on the kitchen counter as she completed the task she had already begun, reviewing a set of notes from the previous evening. Her routine did not shift to accommodate the message. It adjusted around it. At 11:03, she picked up the phone again, where the reply came within seconds, as if Chloe had been waiting. Elm and Parker. 2 p.m. Bridget read it once, then placed the phone down again. No confirmation. Across town, Chloe interpreted the exchange as compliance. Bridget's question in her mind signaled uncertainty, someone who needed direction. The absence of a formal agreement did not concern her. She assumed Bridget would appear. Assumption, like confidence, can be difficult to distinguish from accuracy in its early stages. At 1:52 p.m., Bridget stepped into the cafe. She had chosen her clothing with the same precision she applied to everything else. Neutral tones, structured lines. Nothing that drew attention, but nothing that suggested vulnerability. Her posture remained unchanged from any other day, upright, balanced, controlled. She scanned the room once. Chloe sat near the back, positioned with her back to the wall, a strategic choice that allowed her to observe the entrance without turning. Her phone rested on the table screen facing up. A glass of water sat untouched beside it. Bridget approached without hesitation. "Chloe," she said, her voice even. Chloe looked up, a brief smile forming. "You came, you asked," Bridget replied. The distinction went unacknowledged. "Sit," Chloe said, gesturing to the chair across from her. Bridget did. There was no immediate conversation. A server approached, offered menus, received a polite decline from both, and left. The table remained bare, aside from Chloe's glass and phone. Chloe leaned forward slightly. "I think we both know why we're here," she began. Bridget met her gaze. "You initiated contact. You can define the purpose." The response was not confrontational. It was procedural. Chloe's smile tightened just enough to register. "All right," she said. "Then I'll be direct." She paused, not for effect, but to measure. "Jayden and I are involved. This isn't temporary. It's not a mistake. It's something that's moving forward." The statement was delivered with clarity, without apology. Chloe watched for reaction. Bridget did not provide one. "I've already accounted for that," she said. The phrasing introduced a variable Chloe had not anticipated. "Accounted for," Chloe repeated. "Yes." There was no elaboration. Chloe adjusted her approach. "I don't think you understand the situation," she said, her tone shifting slightly. "He's not going to stay in something that doesn't work. And from what I've seen, this," she gestured subtly between them, "doesn't." Bridget's gaze did not move. "Your assessment is based on limited data," she replied. Chloe let out a soft, controlled laugh. "Limited, but you've interacted with a version of this environment that is curated," Bridget said. "That version is not complete." The words were precise, but they did not carry threat. They carried structure. Chloe leaned back, reassessing. "Then complete it for me," she said. "What am I missing?" Bridget considered the question not for its content, but for its positioning. "You're not missing anything relevant to your current objective," she said. "And what is my objective?" Chloe asked. "To establish control," Bridget replied. The answer landed without emphasis. Chloe's expression shifted just slightly. "You think this is about control?" she asked. "I think your actions align with that outcome," Bridget said. There was no accusation, only observation. Chloe studied her for a moment longer, then leaned forward again, closing the distance between them by a fraction. "Let me simplify this," she said, her voice lower now. "You can walk away quietly, or this becomes more difficult than it needs to be." The statement was not loud. It did not need to be. Bridget did not move. "Define difficult," she said. Chloe held her gaze. "Public, uncomfortable. Situations where you're not in control." There it was. Not a threat of violence, not overt aggression, but an implied shift into spaces where perception could be manipulated. Bridget noted it. "Understood," she said. Chloe waited, and she prompted. And nothing Bridget replied. The absence of reaction disrupted the expected flow. "You're not going to respond?" Chloe asked. "I am responding," Bridget said. "You've outlined your perspective. I've acknowledged it. That's it." Chloe's tone sharpened. "For now." The phrase carried timing without revealing it. Chloe exhaled slowly, recalibrating. "You're very calm," she said. "Yes. Do you think that's going to help you?" Chloe asked. "I don't think in those terms," Bridget replied. "Then how do you think Chloe pressed?" "In terms of outcome," Bridget said. The conversation had shifted beyond what Chloe had anticipated. She had expected resistance, denial, perhaps emotional reaction. Instead, she encountered structure. Structure without visible leverage. It unsettled her, though she did not show it. "Let me be clear," Chloe said, returning to a more assertive tone. "This isn't a conversation that ends with you staying where you are." Bridget nodded once. "I agree." The agreement landed in a way Chloe had not intended. "You do?" she asked. "Yes." There was no elaboration. Silence settled between them, not empty, but weighted. Chloe broke it. "Then why are you still here?" she asked. Bridget's answer came without delay. "Because you requested a meeting," she said. The response reestablished the framework. Chloe leaned back, her posture shifting from forward pressure to measured distance. "All right," she said after a moment. "We'll see how this plays out." Bridget stood. "There's no need to wait," she said. "It's already in motion." The statement was delivered without emphasis, without visible intent to intimidate. It was simply placed. Chloe watched her for a second longer, searching for something beneath the surface. She did not find it. Bridget turned and left the cafe without looking back. Outside, the afternoon light remained unchanged. The street moved as it always did, unaware of the interaction that had just occurred within one of its quieter corners. Bridget did not pause. She did not check her phone. She did not alter her pace. The meeting had served its purpose. Confirmation. Chloe's approach had moved from indirect pressure to direct positioning. The language used, the implications made the structure of the interaction all aligned with the pattern Bridget had already documented. She did not need to interpret it further. Back inside the cafe, Chloe remained seated, her phone still untouched on the table. She replayed the conversation not for what was said, but for what had not been. No denial, no defense, no visible weakness. It was not the response she had prepared for. Across the city, Jayden continued his day without awareness of the meeting that had just taken place. He operated under the assumption that the dynamics he had set in motion remained within his control. He did not consider that those dynamics had intersected independently of him. Bridget returned home, entered the quiet structure she had maintained, and moved directly to her workspace. Her laptop opened. The archive expanded. Meeting with Mercer Chloe. Location Elm and Parker Cafe. Time 14:00. Direct confirmation of relationship. Verbal implication of escalation to public pressure. Behavior consistent with control-seeking pattern. She saved the entry, then added one final line. Escalation threshold approaching. The system remained intact. But the next phase would not remain private. The invitation arrived 2 days after the meeting at Elm and Parker. It came through Jayden, though the phrasing suggested it had not originated with him. "Some people from work are coming over this weekend," he said casually, standing near the kitchen island, as if the information carried no weight. "Just something informal. A barbecue. It'll be good for networking." Bridget looked up from her laptop, her expression unchanged. "How many people?" she asked. "Not many," Jayden replied. "A few colleagues, friends." The pause that followed was brief but measurable. "Chloe will be there," he added, as if it were an afterthought. Bridget closed the laptop slowly. Understood. There were no further questions, no objections. The conversation ended with the same controlled neutrality that had defined every exchange between them in recent weeks. Jayden interpreted the response as acceptance. Bridget categorized it as confirmation. Saturday arrived with clear skies and a steady breeze that moved through the backyard without disrupting the arrangement Jayden had set in place. The grill was positioned near the far edge of the patio. Tables had been arranged with deliberate spacing, allowing clusters of conversation without crowding. Music played at a low volume enough to fill silence, but not enough to dominate it. Guests began arriving shortly after noon. They came in small groups, each interaction carrying the polite familiarity of professional overlap. Introductions were made. Hands were shaken. Names were exchanged, and in some cases forgotten almost immediately. Bridget moved through the space with quiet efficiency. She greeted those who approached her. She maintained eye contact, offered measured responses, and then allowed conversations to move on without anchoring them. She did not seek attention. She did not avoid it. She existed within the environment, as she always had present, but not positioned at the center. Chloe arrived 30 minutes later. She entered with Jayden at her side, their proximity closer than what would typically be expected between colleagues in a setting like this. It was subtle, but not invisible. A few guests noticed. Most did not comment. Chloe's gaze moved across the yard, scanning faces, measuring reactions. When it settled on Bridget, there was a moment brief but distinct, where her expression sharpened. Then it softened into something more performative. Bridget, she called her tone, carrying just enough volume to draw attention without appearing disruptive. Bridget turned. "Chloe," she replied. The exchange was simple, controlled, but the surrounding conversations slowed, not stopping entirely, just enough to register the shift. Chloe approached. "You look composed," she said, stopping a few feet away. "As always." "It's a consistent state," Bridget replied. There was no smile, but there was no hostility either. Jayden stood slightly behind Chloe. His posture relaxed, though his attention remained fixed on the interaction. Chloe tilted her head as if considering something. "I was thinking about our conversation," she said. Bridget did not respond immediately. "I imagine you were," she said after a moment. Chloe stepped closer, reducing the distance between them. "I think it's time to move things forward," she continued. The phrasing was deliberate. Not a private statement. Not entirely public either. Positioned in that narrow space where it could be heard if someone chose to listen. A few guests did. Bridget remained still. "Define forward," she said. Chloe smiled, but it did not reach her eyes. "Clarity," she replied. "For everyone." She turned slightly, just enough to include the surrounding space in her gesture. This situation, she motioned between Bridget and Jayden, isn't sustainable. And I don't think it should be handled quietly anymore. There it was. The transition from implied pressure to visible positioning. Jayden shifted his weight, a subtle movement that suggested discomfort, though he did not step in. Bridget noted it. "You're proposing a public adjustment," Bridget said. "I'm proposing honesty," Chloe replied. The distinction was intentional. Bridget's gaze remained steady. "Honesty requires accuracy," she said. Chloe let out a soft laugh. "Oh, I think we're well past that," she said. Then, without waiting for further exchange, she closed the remaining distance. Her hand moved not aggressively, but with a controlled assertiveness toward Bridget's shoulder, adjusting the fabric of her blouse as if correcting something out of place. The gesture was small, but it crossed a boundary. Presentation matters. Chloe added her voice lower now, though still audible to those closest. The contact lasted only a second. Bridget did not move to stop it. She did not step back. She allowed the action to complete. Around them, the air shifted. Conversations paused. Not entirely, but enough to create a pocket of attention that centered on the interaction. Jayden remained where he was. He did not intervene. Chloe's hand lingered a fraction longer than necessary before withdrawing. "There," she said. "Better." The word hung in the space between them. Bridget's eyes did not leave Chloe's face. "Is that your assessment?" she asked. Chloe's smile returned sharper this time. "It's an observation," she replied. Bridget nodded once, noted. The simplicity of the response disrupted the expected escalation. Chloe had anticipated resistance or retreat, something that would allow her to define the next move. Instead, she encountered acknowledgement without submission. She adjusted. "You don't seem concerned," she said. "Concern requires uncertainty," Bridget replied. "And you're certain?" Chloe pressed. "Yes." The answer was immediate. Jayden's posture shifted again, more noticeably this time. "What exactly are you certain about?" he asked, stepping forward just enough to enter the exchange. Bridget turned her head slightly, acknowledging him without fully redirecting her attention. "That the current trajectory is consistent," she said. The phrasing did not clarify. It did not need to. Chloe exhaled a controlled release of tension. "You're very composed for someone in your position," she said. Bridget did not respond. Chloe stepped closer again, narrowing the space to a point where the interaction could no longer be mistaken for casual conversation. "Let me make this simpler," she said, her voice steady but firm. "You don't belong here anymore." The statement was clear, public, final in its intention. A few guests exchanged glances. Others looked away, choosing not to engage. Jayden did not speak. Bridget's response came after a brief pause, not out of hesitation, but precision. "Your definition of here is limited," she said. Chloe's expression tightened. "Is it?" she asked. "Yes," Bridget replied. There was no elaboration. Silence followed, not empty, but dense. Chloe broke it with a small, dismissive gesture. "We'll see," she said. Bridget inclined her head slightly. "You will," she replied. The exchange ended not with resolution, but with placement. Chloe stepped back, rejoining the broader flow of the gathering, though her attention remained partially fixed on Bridget. Jayden lingered for a moment longer, as if considering whether to say something. He chose not to. Instead, he turned away, returning to the grill, to the guests, to the version of control he believed he still maintained. Bridget remained where she was for a few seconds, allowing the space to settle. Then she moved, not away from the gathering, but through it. She continued to greet guests, to respond when addressed, to maintain the same measured presence she had held from the beginning. Nothing in her behavior suggested disruption. Nothing indicated that anything had shifted. But internally, the threshold had been crossed. The interaction had moved from implication to action, from private pressure to public display. Bridget had allowed it, because it confirmed what she needed. Later that evening, as the last guests began to leave, Bridget stood near the edge of the patio, her posture unchanged, her gaze steady. Chloe passed by her once more, pausing just long enough to speak. "This isn't over," she said quietly. Bridget looked at her. "Wasn't intended to be," she replied. Chloe held her gaze for a second longer, then turned and walked away. Jayden did not witness the final exchange. He was occupied with another conversation, another assumption, another belief in a system that remained to him intact. Bridget waited until the yard was empty, until the noise had settled, until the environment returned to its controlled state. Then she went inside. Her laptop opened. The archive expanded. Event backyard gathering. Participants Ross Jayden, Mercer Chloe, multiple witnesses. Behavioral escalation, physical contact initiated by Mercer. Verbal statements indicating public pressure. No intervention from Ross Jayden. She paused, then added one final line. Threshold reached. The system was complete. The house returned to silence in increments. First, the low music ended. Then the final voices faded beyond the driveway. Car doors closed, engines started, headlights swept briefly across the front windows before disappearing into the street. What remained was the structure Bridget had always maintained: quiet, contained, and controlled. She stood at the kitchen counter for a moment after locking the door. Not to reflect, to transition. The event had moved from external to internal, from observation to action. Bridget picked up her phone and unlocked it with a single precise motion. The message thread from Chloe remained open, the most recent line still visible. "This isn't over." Bridget did not respond. She did not need to. Instead, she opened her email. The contact had already been prepared. Michael Grant, subject line initiation. Her fingers moved steadily across the screen. Michael, I am ready to proceed. Documentation is structured and available for review. I will require discretion and immediate assessment of next steps. B. Ross. She read it once, ensuring clarity without excess. Then she sent it. Time 7:48 p.m. No delay, no reconsideration. The message did not carry emotion. It carried instruction. She placed the phone down and moved to the dining table where her laptop was already open. The archive waited exactly as she had left it, organized, segmented, complete to the level required for preliminary action. She began exporting. Financial records categorized by date and type. Screenshots of transactions, each labeled and cross-referenced. Message logs including the unidentified number linked to Chloe. Behavioral notes structured in sequence with timestamps and contextual alignment. Each file moved into a secure folder prepared for external transfer. Encryption enabled. Redundancies established. Bridget did not rush. Speed without accuracy introduced risk. She had not built the system to compromise it at the point of transition. Upstairs, Jayden moved through the house with a different rhythm. The evening in his mind had been successful. The gathering had positioned him well socially. The interactions had reinforced his standing among colleagues. Even the tension, what little of it he acknowledged, felt contained, manageable. He entered the bedroom, removed his jacket, and placed it over a chair without much attention. His phone remained in his hand screen, lighting intermittently with incoming messages. "Chloe, you handled that well." He read it, a small sense of validation settling in. "Glad you were there," he typed back. The exchange remained brief. He did not consider what had been handled or how. Downstairs, Bridget completed the final transfer of files into the secure folder. She ran a verification check confirming integrity across all documents. No corruption, no missing data. She closed the laptop momentarily, then reopened it to initiate the next step, drafting. The legal process required more than evidence. It required structure in presentation, a narrative built not from assumption, but from demonstrable sequence. She began outlining. Timeline initiation of behavioral change. Financial deviation documented with supporting records. External contact, unsolicited communication escalation pattern. Public incident, witnessed interaction, physical contact, verbal implication. Each category aligned with the documentation already secured. She did not write arguments. She built frameworks. At 8:12 p.m., her phone vibrated. Michael Grant. Call Bridget answered immediately. Michael. Bridget, his voice came through measured professional. I received your email. You said you're ready to proceed. I am, she replied. Do you have documentation? Yes. How extensive, comprehensive, to the level required for initial filing and protective measures? There was a brief pause on the line. Understood, he said. We'll need to move quickly if you want to maintain control of the process. I do. All right. I'll send you a secure link. Upload everything. I'll review tonight and we can discuss strategy first thing in the morning. Confirmed. And Bridget, he added, his tone shifting slightly, if there's any immediate risk. There isn't, she said. The response was immediate, not dismissive, but certain. Good, Michael replied. Then we proceed. The call ended. Seconds later, the secure link arrived. Bridget opened it, verified the encryption, and began uploading the prepared files. The progress bar moved steadily, each percentage point marking a shift from internal preparation to external action. She did not watch it continuously. She monitored it. At 8:37 p.m., the upload completed. She closed the browser, then opened a new document. Next steps. Filing for divorce. Request for financial protection. Documentation of asset diversion. Inclusion of third-party involvement where relevant. She paused, considering the final line, then added, maintain non-confrontational stance. Upstairs, Jayden scrolled through his phone, the glow of the screen reflecting faintly in the darkened room. He had not checked on Bridget. He assumed she had gone to bed. The absence of conflict reinforced his belief that the situation remained under control. He did not consider that control had already shifted. At 9:05 p.m., Bridget received a confirmation from Michael. Files received. Reviewing now. We're in a strong position. She read the message once, then archived it. There was no visible reaction. Not relief, not satisfaction, only progression. She stood moved through the house and turned off the remaining lights. Each switch clicked into place with the same measured consistency that had defined her routine for years. The environment returned to its baseline. Before going upstairs, she paused in the living room. Not out of hesitation, to confirm. The system she had built was no longer internal. It had been transferred, reviewed, and acknowledged. The next phase would involve external processes, legal, structured, irreversible, once initiated. She turned off the final light. The following morning arrived without disruption. Bridget woke at the same time. The coffee brewed, the blinds opened to the same angle. The house did not reflect the shift that had occurred within it. Jayden came downstairs later, his movements unhurried. Morning, he said. Good morning, Bridget replied. There was no change in her tone. He poured himself coffee, glancing briefly at his phone. I might be out again tonight, he said. Work. Bridget nodded. Understood. The exchange ended there. At 7:42 a.m., Bridget's phone vibrated. Michael Grant, call me when available. We need to file today. Bridget looked at the message, then at the time. Are you available now? She asked Jayden. He looked up surprised. For what? A brief conversation, she said. He hesitated, then shrugged. Sure. What is it? Bridget did not answer immediately. She picked up her phone, dialed Michael, and waited for the line to connect. Jayden watched a faint line forming between his brows. Bridget, he said. She held up a hand, not dismissive, not aggressive, just a signal to wait. Michael answered. I'm here, she said. We're ready, he replied. We filed this morning. Once it's submitted, there's no reversal without consequence. Proceed, Bridget said. Jayden's posture shifted. What's going on? He asked, his tone no longer casual. Bridget ended the call. Then she looked at him. The silence that followed was not the same as before. It was no longer observational. It was final in its direction. You'll be notified formally, she said. The words were precise. Jayden stared at her, the certainty he had carried beginning to fracture. Notified of what he demanded, Bridget did not raise her voice. She did not step closer. She simply answered, process initiation. The phrase did not explain. It did not need to, because the system once set in motion would. Jayden did not move immediately after Bridget spoke. The words did not register in the way he expected language to function. They were not framed as accusation. They did not carry emotion. There was no escalation in tone, no visible trigger that he could identify and respond to. Process initiation. It sounded procedural, detached, almost abstract. What process, he asked, though the question came out sharper than he intended. Bridget did not answer right away. She placed her phone back on the counter with the same controlled motion she used for everything else. Then turned slightly, aligning herself with him without closing the distance. The legal process, she said. The clarity arrived without emphasis. Jayden's expression shifted, first confusion, then resistance, then something closer to disbelief. You're filing, he said. Yes. For what he pressed as if narrowing the scope could limit the reality of it. Dissolution of marriage, Bridget replied. The phrase was formal, exact. Jayden let out a short breath, something between a laugh and a scoff. He stopped recalibrating. This is an overreaction. Bridget did not respond to the characterization. There's no overreaction in procedure, she said. He shook his head, stepping away from the counter, pacing once across the kitchen before turning back. You didn't even talk to me, he said. You didn't say anything. And now you just decide this. I did not decide this today, Bridget said. The correction was quiet but precise. Jayden's jaw tightened. Then when he demanded. Bridget held his gaze. When the pattern became consistent, she replied. The word pattern landed without context for him, but it carried weight. What pattern, he asked. Bridget did not list it. Not here, not in this space. The one you maintained, she said. Jayden exhaled sharply, frustration beginning to override confusion. So that's it. You're just going to walk away based on assumptions. Bridget tilted her head slightly. There are no assumptions in documented behavior, she said. The phrasing slowed him, just for a second. Documented, he repeated. Yes. Silence followed. Not the familiar quiet of their house, but something tighter, more contained. Jayden studied her, searching for something he recognized. Emotion, hesitation, doubt. Something that would allow him to reposition the conversation. He did not find it. You've been, what he said finally. Tracking me, observing, Bridget replied. That's the same thing he said. It isn't, she said. The distinction held. Jayden ran a hand through his hair, the first visible break in his controlled demeanor. This is unnecessary, he said. Whatever you think you saw, we can fix it. Bridget did not move. Define fix, she said. He paused, thrown by the question. We talk, he said. We figure it out. That's what people do. Bridget considered the statement. People also act, she said. "And I'm here, aren't I?" Jayden replied. "I'm talking to you, after the fact," Bridget said. The timing mattered. Like, Miss Jayden's expression hardened. "So what you've already decided? I'm the problem." Bridget did not answer in that framework. "The process has already been initiated," she said. It was not an accusation. It was a boundary. Jayden stopped pacing. "Stop saying that," he said. "Process procedure, this is a marriage, Bridget." "Yes," she said. "And you don't just end it like a business deal," he added. Bridget's gaze remained steady. "This did not begin as one," she said. "But it has been managed like one for some time." The statement did not raise her voice. It did not need to. Jayden looked at her, really looked this time, as if trying to reconcile the person in front of him with the one he believed he had understood. "This is about Chloe," he said. Bridget did not confirm or deny immediately. "She is part of the documented pattern," she said. The phrasing was deliberate. "So, you are jealous," he said, almost as if relieved to find something he could define. "No," Bridget replied. The answer was immediate. Then what he asked. "Aligned," she said. "With what he pressed." "With outcome," Bridget replied. The conversation was slipping outside of his control. Jayden stepped closer, closing some of the distance that had remained between them. "Listen," he said, lowering his voice. "Whatever you think is happening, it's not what you're making it into." Bridget did not step back. "It is exactly what it is," she said. He shook his head again, frustration now fully visible. "You're blowing this up," he said. "Over nothing." Bridget's expression did not change. "Nothing does not produce consistent evidence," she said. The words settled in a way Jayden could not immediately counter. He shifted tactics. "What do you want?" he asked. The question was direct. For the first time, it resembled negotiation. Bridget recognized it. "I have already outlined the objective," she said. "Then say it clearly," he insisted. "Dissolution," she replied. The repetition removed ambiguity. Jayden stared at her, the weight of the situation beginning to settle beyond denial. "And you think you just walk away clean," he said. Bridget did not respond to the implication. "The legal process will determine distribution," she said. "So now it's about money?" he asked. "It is about structure," she replied. The distinction held. Jayden let out a breath longer this time, as if trying to reset. "This doesn't have to be ugly," he said. Bridget inclined her head slightly. "It does not," she agreed. "Then don't make it that way," he added. "I won't," she said. The certainty in her tone did not align with his expectation of concession. He studied her again more carefully now. There was something he had missed. Not recently, consistently. "You've been planning this," he said. Bridget did not deny it. "I've been preparing," she said. The word choice mattered. "For how long?" he asked. Bridget did not answer with a number. "Long enough to remove uncertainty," she said. Jayden exhaled slowly, the realization forming in stages. "You didn't say anything," he said, quieter now. "I was observing," Bridget replied. "That's not the same," he said. "It is when action follows," she said. Silence returned. This time it held differently. Jayden looked at the counter at the space where her phone rested, as if the object itself now represented something he could not access. "What happens now?" he asked. Bridget answered without delay. "You will receive formal notice," she said, "from counsel." And then he pressed. "Then the process continues," she replied. The structure remained. Jayden nodded once, though it was more reflex than agreement. He did not argue further. Not because he accepted the outcome, but because he no longer understood the position he was in. Bridget watched him, not with judgment, not with satisfaction, with completion of a phase. The conversation had not been about convincing. It had been about placement, and now placement was established. By mid-morning, the filing was complete. There was no visible marker for the moment it happened. No sound in the house, no shift in the light through the windows, no signal that something irreversible had been set into motion. The change existed in a system outside the walls, time-stamped, logged, and now part of a legal record that did not require acknowledgement to proceed. Bridget received confirmation at 10:18 a.m. filed. Case number assigned. Service will be initiated. She read the message once, then archived it. Across the kitchen, Jayden stood with his phone in hand, scrolling without focus. The conversation from earlier had not settled into anything he could categorize. It had not escalated into an argument. It had not resolved into understanding. It had simply redirected the structure of the day. He looked up. "So what now?" he asked again, though the question had already been answered. Bridget did not repeat herself. "The process continues," she said. Jayden exhaled, this time slower, as if trying to find footing. "You're serious about this?" he said. "Yes." The answer carried no emphasis. It did not need to. He nodded once, then turned away, moving toward the living room. The distance he created was not physical alone. It was an attempt to regain orientation, to find a version of control that still made sense. Bridget remained where she was for a moment longer, then moved to her workspace. Her laptop opened. The archive expanded again, not with new data, but with categorization for external review. What had once been a private system now needed to align with legal frameworks, clear, concise, defensible. She created a new section, Case Integration. Within it, she began mapping existing documentation to legal relevance. Financial records, asset diversion, non-disclosed expenditures, message logs, external contact escalation behavior, behavioral notes, pattern establishment corroboration with financial timeline, event documentation, witness-supported interaction, physical boundary crossing. She did not interpret beyond what could be supported. She aligned. At 10:46 a.m., her phone vibrated. Unknown number. The message arrived without greeting. "What did you do?" Bridget read it. "Chloe." The timing was precise. The filing had triggered movement beyond the immediate household. Notifications, internal or external, had begun to circulate. Bridget did not respond. Instead, she saved the message and added it to the existing thread and updated her notes. External awareness confirmed. Reaction immediate. Across town, Chloe stood near the window of her office, her phone still in her hand. The message she had sent remained unanswered. She had not expected that, not the silence that she had encountered before, but the context of it. Something had shifted, not gradually, but all at once without her involvement. She turned back toward her desk, opened her laptop, and checked her email again. Nothing. No direct notification. But the absence of clarity created pressure. She dialed Jayden. He answered on the second ring. "Hey," he said, his tone controlled, but uneven beneath the surface. "What happened?" Chloe asked. There was no preamble. Jayden paused. "She filed," he said. The words settled heavily. For what Chloe pressed. "Divorce," he replied. Silence followed. Not empty, processing. When Chloe asked, "This morning," the timing aligned. Chloe exhaled slowly, her grip tightening slightly around the phone. "She didn't say anything," Jayden added, as if the lack of warning remained the most disorienting element. Chloe's eyes narrowed, not in confusion, but recalculation. "She said something," Chloe replied. "You just didn't understand it." Jayden did not respond immediately. "What does that mean?" he asked. "It means she's been ahead of this," Chloe said. The realization was not comfortable, but it was clear. Jayden shifted on the other end of the line. "She's overreacting," he said, though the statement carried less certainty than before. "No," Chloe replied. "She's acting." The distinction mattered. Back at the house, Bridget continued working. The system did not require urgency. It required accuracy. She cross-referenced timestamps one final time, ensuring alignment between financial records and documented interactions. There were no inconsistencies. She paused, then opened a new document. Background. This was the section that required minimal detail but maximum precision. Not narrative, not emotion, context, marriage duration, shared assets, professional backgrounds. She typed Bridget Ross, performance training consultant, Jayden Ross, business consultant, corporate restructuring. She did not expand on her own role, not yet. The information was accurate. It was also incomplete. At 11:32 a.m., Michael Grant called. "I've reviewed the initial documentation," he said. "It's thorough." "Understood," Bridget replied. "There's something I want to clarify," he continued. "Your notes, your structure, it suggests a level of analysis beyond typical observation." Bridget did not answer immediately. "It is consistent with my professional background," she said. There was a brief pause. "Which is?" Michael asked. Bridget considered the question, then answered. "I work in performance training for high-pressure environments," she said. Michael waited. "That includes contract work with federal units," she added. "Specialized." The phrasing remained controlled. "Understood," Michael said. His tone shifted slightly, not surprised, but recalibrated. "That explains the structure." "Yes. It also means we need to be precise in how we present this," he continued. "You've built a strong case. We don't want to overstate it." "I agree," Bridget said. "Good," Michael replied. "Service will be completed today or tomorrow. Once that happens, we move into response phase." "Confirmed." "And, Bridget," he added, "given the escalation pattern you've documented there, may be attempts to provoke a reaction." "I've accounted for that," she said. "I assumed you had," Michael replied. The call ended. Bridget closed the document. The background section remained minimal. It did not need to expand. Her professional history was not the focus. It was the framework. Outside, the day continued without interruption. Inside, the system held. Jayden returned to the kitchen just after noon, his movements slower now, more deliberate. "They're going to serve me?" he asked. "Yes," Bridget said. "When soon?" He nodded, absorbing the information in pieces. "And you're just continuing like this?" he asked. Bridget looked at him. "This is continuation," she said. The phrasing redefined the moment. Jayden did not argue. He did not agree. He simply stood there, positioned within a structure he no longer understood. Bridget turned back to her work. The system did not require acknowledgement to function. It only required completion. Service occurred at 2:14 p.m. It did not arrive with a drama. There were no raised voices, no public scene. A man in a neutral suit stepped onto the front porch, confirmed Jayden Ross by name, and handed him a sealed envelope. The exchange lasted less than a minute. Jayden stood at the door longer than necessary after it closed. The envelope remained unopened in his hand, its weight disproportionate to its size. It was not unfamiliar. He had seen documents like this before, in a professional context. Contracts, notices, formal communications that signaled a shift from conversation to consequence. This one was personal. He turned it over once, then again, as if the motion might alter its contents. In the living room, Bridget remained seated, her posture unchanged, her attention directed toward the laptop in front of her. She had heard the door. She had heard the exchange. She did not look up. Jayden opened the envelope. The sound of paper unfolding carried through the room, quiet but distinct. He read the first page quickly, scanning rather than absorbing. Legal language, structured and precise. The words did not soften themselves for understanding. They established position. Petition for dissolution of marriage. Request for equitable distribution. Allegations supported by documented evidence. Jayden's eyes moved faster, searching for something he could challenge, something that did not align with his understanding. He did not find it. Bridget. He set his voice lower now, less controlled. She did not look up immediately. Yes. He stepped further into the room, the papers still in his hand. This says you've already submitted financial records, he said. Yes. And messages, he added. Yes. And behavioral documentation, he finished the phrase, unfamiliar in this context. Yes. Jayden exhaled a slow release that did not resolve anything. You built a case, he said. I built a record, Bridget replied. The distinction mattered. He moved closer, placing the papers on the table between them. This isn't normal, he said. It is within procedure, she answered. That's not the same thing, he insisted. It is when the outcome depends on it, she said. Jayden ran a hand across his face, the gesture no longer controlled. You could have talked to me, he said again, though the argument had already lost its structure. I observed, Bridget replied. That's not communication, he said. It is when action follows, she said. The repetition did not change the meaning. Jayden looked down at the documents again, his eyes catching on a section he had not fully processed. Third-party involvement, he read aloud. His gaze lifted. You included Chloe, he said. Yes. On what basis, he asked. Documented interaction, Bridget replied. That's not, he stopped recalibrating. That's not enough to, it is when it aligns with financial records, she said. The sentence closed the gap he was attempting to create. Jayden's posture shifted, the confidence he had carried, now replaced by something less stable. You're making this bigger than it is, he said. Bridget did not respond to the scale. I am aligning it with evidence, she said. The phrasing held. A knock sounded at the door. Jayden froze for a fraction of a second, then turned his movement slower, now more deliberate. He opened the door. Chloe stood on the porch. She did not wait to be invited in. What did you do? She asked. Stepping past him into the house, her tone controlled, but sharp beneath the surface. Laintum. Jayden closed the door behind her. She filed, he said. Chloe's gaze moved immediately to Bridget. You went straight to legal, she said. Bridget looked up. Yes. There was no elaboration. Chloe stepped closer, her posture no longer performative, but direct. Without even addressing it, she asked. It has been addressed, Bridget replied. Where Chloe demanded. In the documentation, Bridget said. The answer did not satisfy. That's not how this works, Chloe said. It is how this works now, Bridget replied. The shift in tense was deliberate. Chloe exhaled a controlled release that bordered on frustration. You're trying to control the narrative, she said. I am structuring the record, Bridget replied. Jayden watched the exchange, his position between them now undefined. This is getting out of hand, he said, though the statement lacked direction. Chloe did not look at him. You're involving me in something I didn't agree to, she said to Bridget. You initiated contact, Bridget replied. That's not the same, Chloe said. It is when it is documented, Bridget answered. The consistency in her responses did not escalate. It contained. Chloe's expression tightened. You think this makes you untouchable? She asked. No, Bridget said. It makes the process clear. The distinction held again. Chloe stepped closer, reducing the distance between them to a point that would have been confrontational in any other context. You don't get to decide how this plays out, she said. Bridget did not move. The process does, she replied. Silence followed. Jayden looked between them, the dynamic no longer aligning with anything he could manage. What happens now? He asked, directing the question to Bridget, though his tone carried uncertainty. Your counsel will respond, she said. And if I don't agree, he pressed. The process continues, she replied. The repetition reinforced the structure. Chloe let out a short, controlled laugh. "You've turned this into a system," she said. Bridget inclined her head slightly. "It always was," she said. The statement reframed everything that had come before. Chloe's gaze held on her for a moment longer, searching for something beneath the surface: emotion, hesitation, anything that could be used to shift the balance. She did not find it. "This isn't over," Chloe said. "It is not intended to be," Bridget replied. The same words as before now, carrying different weight. Chloe turned her movements sharper than when she had entered. "This is going to get complicated," she said, directing the statement toward Jayden now. "It already is," he replied. The acknowledgement came without resistance. Chloe paused at the door, then left without another word. The house returned to silence. Jayden remained standing, the documents still spread across the table, their presence now unavoidable. He looked at Bridget. "You've thought through all of this," he said. "Yes." "And there's nothing I can say to change it?" he asked. Bridget met his gaze. "No." The answer was final, not in tone, but in structure. Jayden nodded once slowly. "Then I need a lawyer," he said. "That would be consistent with the process," Bridget replied. He let out a breath, something between resignation and recalibration. "All right," he said. There was no agreement in the word, only acceptance of position. Bridget returned her attention to the laptop. The system continued. The first hearing was scheduled within 10 days. Not a full trial, not a final determination. A preliminary session designed to establish position, assess documentation, and set the framework for what would follow. It was procedural, structured, and in its own way decisive in shaping the trajectory of the case. Bridget arrived early. The courthouse on West Jefferson Street held the same quiet authority. It always did. High ceilings controlled movement, voices lowered not by instruction, but by expectation. She moved through the security checkpoint without hesitation, her posture unchanged, her pace consistent. Michael Grant met her near the elevators. He carried a folder, though the bulk of the documentation existed digitally, already submitted, already reviewed. "You're on time," he said. "I am," Bridget replied. He nodded, not as praise, but as acknowledgement. "I've reviewed everything again this morning," he said. "Your documentation is unusually thorough." Bridget did not respond to the observation. "It works in our favor," he continued. "But we need to stay within the structure. No expansion beyond what's necessary." "Understood," she said. They moved toward the courtroom. Jayden was already there. He stood near the back, speaking quietly with a man Bridget did not recognize, his attorney. The conversation stopped as she entered. Jayden's gaze shifted toward her, holding for a moment longer than required, as if trying to reconcile the environment with the person he had lived with for years. Bridget did not hold the look. She took her seat beside Michael. Across the room, Chloe sat 2 rows behind Jayden. Her presence was not required, but she had chosen to attend. Her posture was composed, her expression controlled, but there was a tension in the way she held her hands together, fingers interlaced more tightly than necessary. The hearing began without ceremony. The judge entered the room, rose, then settled again. Names were called. Case numbers confirmed. Ross v. Ross. The phrasing was formal, neutral. It did not carry the history behind it. Michael stood. "Your Honor, we are here on behalf of the petitioner, Bridget Ross," he began. "We have submitted comprehensive documentation supporting claims of financial misallocation, undisclosed expenditures, and third-party involvement relevant to asset distribution." His tone was measured. No embellishment, no unnecessary emphasis. Jayden's attorney stood in response. "We acknowledge receipt of the documentation," he said. "We will be contesting both the characterization and the scope of the claims." The structure established itself quickly. Position. Counterposition. The judge nodded. We will proceed with preliminary review, she said. Michael stepped forward, referencing the submitted materials. Exhibit A. He said financial records indicating a pattern of expenditures inconsistent with joint account transparency. A screen displayed the data. Dates, amounts, locations, aligned. Jayden's attorney approached, scanning the information. These are standard expenditures, he said. Business-related. Michael did not argue the point. Then we can align them with corresponding business records, he said. The implication settled without confrontation. The judge made a note. Proceed, she said. Exhibit B, Michael continued. Message logs indicating direct external contact with the petitioner escalating in tone and intent. The messages appeared on the screen. You seem very composed. Still composed, I see. We should talk. What did you do? Chloe's posture shifted. Subtle, but visible. Jayden's attorney stepped forward again. These messages lack context, he said. They do not establish intent. Michael nodded once. Context is provided in Exhibit C, he said. Behavioral documentation, not narrative. Sequence. Dates aligned with messages. Messages aligned with financial records. Financial records aligned with documented interactions. A system. The judge reviewed the material, her gaze moving steadily across the screen. This is organized, she said. Michael inclined his head. Yes, Your Honor. Jayden's attorney remained composed, though his movements had slowed slightly. We will require time to review this in full, he said. You will have it, the judge replied. But the structure is clear. She turned her attention to Bridget. Miss Ross, she said. Do you wish to make a statement at this time? Bridget stood. Her movement was unhurried, precise. No, Your Honor, she said. The answer was immediate. The judge studied her for a moment, then nodded. Very well. Across the room, Chloe watched. Not the documents, not the attorneys. Bridget. There was something in the stillness that did not align with her expectations. No visible tension, no reaction to the material being presented. No attempt to control the room through presence, and yet the room was controlled. Through structure, through sequence, through preparation. Jayden shifted beside his attorney, his gaze fixed on the screen. This doesn't prove anything, he said quietly. His attorney did not look at him. It proves consistency, he replied. The distinction mattered. The hearing continued. Exhibit D, Michael said. Recorded interaction from the event on Alder Creek Drive. The video appeared. The backyard, the guests, the movement. Chloe stepping forward, her hand on Bridget's shoulder. The words. Presentation matters. The angle did not exaggerate. It did not need to. It showed enough. Jayden's attorney stepped forward, his tone more deliberate now. This is a social interaction, he said. Not grounds for it is part of a pattern, Michael replied. The phrase repeated. Pattern. The judge watched the clip once, then again. Her expression did not change, but she made a note. Continue, she said. Chloe's hands tightened further. The moment she had controlled in real time now existed outside of her influence. Captured, structured, aligned with everything else. Jayden leaned back slightly, the weight of the situation settling in stages. This is not what it looks like, he said under his breath. No one responded, because it was exactly what it looked like. The hearing moved toward conclusion. The judge closed the file. I will issue temporary orders regarding asset protection, she said. Full review will proceed. Counsel will coordinate next steps. She paused, then added, the documentation provided is comprehensive. I expect the same level of clarity in response. The statement was not directed at one side alone, but it carried weight. The session ended. The room shifted. Chairs moved. Papers gathered. Conversations resumed in quieter tones. Jayden remained seated for a moment longer than necessary. Bridget did not approach him. She did not look back. She stood beside Michael. That was sufficient, he said. Yes, she replied. We move forward, he added. Yes. Across the room, Chloe stood as well. Her gaze met Bridget's briefly. No words, none were required, because the shift had already occurred. Not in emotion, not in confrontation, in structure. And structure, once established, does not reverse easily. Bridget turned and walked toward the exit. The process continued. The temporary orders were issued within 48 hours. They arrived not as a dramatic declaration, but as a structured document, precise, enforceable, and immediate in effect. Asset protection, account restrictions, limitations on discretionary spending, a requirement for full financial disclosure moving forward. Jayden read through the pages twice before placing them down. This is excessive, he said, though the statement lacked the certainty it once carried. His attorney did not agree. This is standard when the court sees a pattern it wants to contain, he replied. Jayden exhaled slowly, his attention drifting back to the document. They're freezing access, he said. Restricting, not freezing, the attorney corrected. But yes, you'll need approval for anything outside defined parameters. Jayden leaned back in his chair. And she keeps control, he asked. She retains operational stability, the attorney said, based on the documentation submitted. The phrasing was careful. The implication was not. Across the city, Bridget received the same document. She read it once, then archived it under case integration. No visible reaction, no shift in posture. The system had progressed exactly as expected. Michael called shortly after. The court is aligning with your documentation, he said. That gives us leverage, but we don't push it unnecessarily. Understood, Bridget replied. We proceed cleanly, he added. No escalation outside the framework. Yes. The call ended. Bridget closed her laptop and stood moving through the house with the same measured rhythm that had defined her actions from the beginning. The environment remained unchanged. The structure held. There was no sense of victory, only continuation. Jayden saw Chloe that evening, not at the house, not in any shared space that could be observed or documented. A restaurant on the edge of the city, dimly lit, private enough to suggest separation from everything that had begun to unravel. Chloe arrived before him. When he sat down, she did not greet him immediately. You didn't tell me it would go this far, she said. Jayden's jaw tightened. I didn't think it would, he replied. Chloe leaned back slightly, studying him. That's not the same thing she said. The distinction mirrored one he had heard before. It's just a process, Jayden said. It'll settle. Chloe shook her head. No, she said. It won't settle. It will conclude. The word landed with a different weight. Jayden looked at her. She's overplaying this, he said. Chloe's expression did not change. She's controlling it, she replied. The correction was immediate. Jayden exhaled, frustration rising again. You saw the hearing, he said. That video, those messages, they don't prove anything. They prove alignment, Chloe said. The same word, the same concept, now repeated from both sides. Jayden looked down at the table, then back up. So what do we do, he asked. Chloe held his gaze. You respond, she said, but you don't react. The phrasing was deliberate. You get your records together. You align your position. You stop assuming this will resolve itself. Jayden nodded once, though the motion carried more uncertainty than agreement. And you, he asked. Chloe's eyes narrowed slightly. I remove myself from visibility, she said. The statement was practical, calculated. Jayden frowned. You're stepping back, he asked. I'm repositioning. Chloe replied. The distinction mattered. He studied her for a moment longer. This wasn't the plan, he said. Chloe's expression remained steady. Plans adjust, she said. In the days that followed, the shift became visible. Not in overt ways, in absence. Chloe stopped appearing in places she had previously occupied with ease. No unexpected visits, no overlapping events, no direct contact with Bridget. The messages ceased. The pressure that had once been external became internalized within the legal structure. Bridget noted it. External contact discontinued. Visibility reduced. Behavioral shift consistent with risk management. She did not interpret beyond that. She recorded. Jayden's response phase began. His attorney requested extensions, additional time to review, clarifications on submitted documentation, standard procedure. But the structure remained unchanged. Each request moved through the same system Bridget had already aligned with. Each response required evidence. Not assumption, not explanation, evidence. Jayden began reviewing his own records. The process was not comfortable. Transactions he had not considered significant now required context. Decisions made without documentation now needed explanation. Patterns he had not recognized now appeared structured when viewed externally. "This looks deliberate," his attorney said at one point, reviewing a series of expenditures. "It wasn't," Jayden replied. "Then we need to show that the attorney said." The burden shifted, from denial to demonstration. Bridget did not attend every meeting. She did not need to. Her presence had already been established through the system she had built. When she did appear, it was precise, brief, aligned with necessity. At one such session held in a smaller conference room within the courthouse, Jayden saw her again. Not across a table, not in confrontation. Seated beside Michael, reviewing documents, her posture unchanged. He watched her for a moment before speaking. "You planned all of this," he said. The statement was not accusatory. It was observational. Bridget looked at him. "I prepared," she replied. "The same distinction," Jayden nodded slowly. "And there's no version of this where we fix it?" he asked. Bridget considered the question, then answered. No, there was no hesitation, no elaboration. The answer did not carry emotion. It carried completion. Jayden looked away, not in anger, in recognition. The court issued its interim ruling shortly after. Asset division would proceed in alignment with documented contributions and financial behavior. Bridget retained primary control over joint assets pending final resolution. Jayden's access remained restricted. There was no mention of Chloe by name. There did not need to be. Her presence existed within the structure already. Chloe read the summary on her phone. She did not react immediately. She scrolled through the details once, then again her expression tightening slightly as the implications settled. "This isn't temporary," she said quietly to herself. Across the room, no one responded, because no one needed to. The system had already answered. Bridget closed the document after reviewing the ruling. She placed the phone down. The house remained quiet, unchanged. Outside, the day moved forward without interruption. Inside, the process continued, not toward confrontation, not toward reversal, toward conclusion. The weeks that followed did not escalate. They settled, not into peace, but into structure. There were no more unexpected visits, no messages from unknown numbers, no attempts to provoke or redefine the situation outside of the legal framework that now governed it. Everything moved through channels, attorneys' filings, scheduled sessions, predictable, contained. Bridget continued her routine without visible alteration. The mornings remained precise. The house remained ordered. Her work continued uninterrupted by the external process that had begun to reshape the boundaries of her personal life. To anyone observing from a distance, nothing had changed. But internally, the system had completed its primary function. Now, it simply ran. Jayden's life, by contrast, began to fragment in ways he had not anticipated. Not dramatically, incrementally. The restrictions imposed by the court altered his access, but more significantly, they altered perception. Within his professional circle, the shift was subtle, but measurable. Conversations that once flowed easily now carried pauses. Invitations became less frequent. The assumption of control he had built his identity around no longer aligned with the reality of his position. He adapted where he could. Longer hours, increased focus on work, attempts to stabilize what remained consistent. But the underlying structure had changed. One evening, after a late meeting that had produced no clear outcome, he sat alone in his office reviewing documents that had once been routine. Financial reports, client summaries, projections. They no longer held the same clarity. His phone remained silent on the desk. No messages from Chloe. That absence more than anything defined the shift. Chloe had repositioned exactly as she had said she would. She did not disappear entirely. She adjusted. Her presence in shared spaces diminished. Her interactions became more selective, more controlled. Where she once moved with visible confidence, she now moved with calculated distance, aligning herself with environments that did not intersect with the ongoing case. It was not retreat. It was preservation. In a private setting, a quiet apartment overlooking a section of the city that carried no connection to Jayden's world, she reviewed her own position. The case had progressed beyond her control. Not because she lacked influence, because the structure had removed it. She replayed the moments that had led here. The messages, the meeting at Elm and Parker, the backyard interaction. Each step had felt controlled at the time, directed, intentional. Now viewed through the lens of outcome, they aligned differently, not as isolated actions, as components of a system she had not recognized until it was complete. Chloe set her phone down. There was nothing to send, nothing to correct. The process did not require her input. Bridget met with Michael in his office one final time before the closing phase. The room was quiet, the windows letting in filtered light that softened the edges of everything within it. "We're approaching resolution," Michael said, reviewing the latest filings. "There are no significant disputes remaining that would justify extending this further." Bridget nodded. "The documentation held," she said. "It did," he confirmed. More than that, it defined the case. There was no praise in his tone, only acknowledgement. "Final terms will reflect that," he added. "Asset distribution account control closure of joint obligations." Bridget listened. "Timeline?" she asked. 2 weeks, Michael said. "Possibly less." She nodded once. "Understood." Michael closed the file. "You've handled this differently than most," he said. Bridget did not respond immediately. "Differently does not imply better or worse," he continued. "But it does change the outcome." "Yes," she said. The agreement was simple. There was nothing more to add. The final meeting took place in a smaller room. Not a courtroom, not a public space. A controlled environment where documents were reviewed, signed, and confirmed. Jayden arrived first. He sat at the table, the papers in front of him already arranged. His posture was composed, but not in the way it had once been. The certainty had been replaced by something quieter. Recognition. Bridget entered with Michael. She took her seat without hesitation. There were no greetings. None were required. The terms were reviewed. Asset distribution aligned with prior rulings. Accounts transferred. Responsibilities assigned. Legal language confirmed what had already been established through process. Jayden read each section carefully. Not because he expected to find errors, because he understood now that details mattered. When he reached the final page, he paused, then looked up. "You're not going to say anything?" he asked. The question was not confrontational. It was uncertain. Bridget met his gaze. "There is nothing that requires statement," she said. The answer was consistent. Jayden nodded slowly. "I didn't see it," he said. Bridget did not ask what he meant. "I thought—" He stopped recalibrating. "I thought silence meant something else." Bridget held his gaze for a moment. "Silence is not absence," she said. The statement was not new, but it carried weight now. Jayden looked down at the document again, then signed. The motion was steady, deliberate, final. Bridget signed after him. Her signature matched everything else she had done. Precise, unaltered. Michael collected the documents. "That concludes the matter," he said. The phrasing was formal, accurate. Outside, the air carried the same quiet movement it always had. Cars passed. People moved through their day without awareness of what had ended inside. Bridget stepped out of the building without pause. She did not look back, not because she avoided it, because there was nothing behind her that required review. Jayden remained inside for a moment longer, not to delay, to understand. Then he stood and left through a different door. Weeks later, the house on Alder Creek Drive no longer held both names. The structure remained. The rhythm remained. But the alignment had shifted. Bridget moved through it as she always had. Not as someone returning, as someone continuing. Her work expanded. New contracts, new environments. The same principles applied to different contexts. Observation, structure, control under pressure. Nothing in her external life suggested what had passed. Because what had passed had not been external. It had been procedural. Chloe, in another part of the city, closed a different chapter. Not formally, not with documents, with distance. The connection she had once positioned as inevitable had dissolved without confrontation, not replaced, not redefined, removed. She did not attempt to restore it, because she understood now what she had not before. Some systems, once completed, do not leave space for re-entry. Bridget stood by the window one evening, the light outside shifting into the same muted tones that had marked countless evenings before. Her phone rested on the table. No messages, no notifications requiring response. The silence held, not as absence, as completion. Completion did not announce itself. There was no single moment that separated before from after. No audible shift, no visible marker that declared the end of one structure and the beginning of another. The documents had been signed. The accounts had been separated. The legal system had closed its file. What remained was continuation. Bridget woke at the same hour she always had. The coffee brewed with the same measured consistency. The blinds opened to the same angle, allowing light to enter without overwhelming the space. The house on Alder Creek Drive no longer held the same alignment, but its rhythm had not changed. She moved through it without adjustment. Not because nothing had happened, because everything that needed to happen had already been completed within a structure that did not require repetition. Her work resumed without interruption. New contracts required travel, not frequent but precise. Environments shifted from controlled indoor training facilities to open, less predictable terrains where variables had to be accounted for in real time. The people she worked with did not ask about her personal life. They did not need to. Their focus remained on performance, on adaptation, on outcomes that could be measured under pressure. Bridget operated within that framework as she always had. Observation, alignment, execution. Nothing in her approach changed. And yet the absence of a parallel system, one that had once required quiet documentation, silent adjustment, created space. Not for reflection, for clarity. Jayden's life did not collapse. It recalibrated. The business remained operational. Clients did not disappear. The external structure he had built still functioned, though not with the same ease. Relationships required more maintenance. Conversations required more precision. The assumption of control he had once carried had been replaced by awareness of limitation. He adapted, because adaptation, when required, becomes necessary. He saw Bridget once more, not by design, in a hallway outside a conference room months after the final documents had been signed. She was there on contract. He was there for a meeting. Their paths intersected without intention. They stopped, not out of obligation, out of recognition. "You're working here?" he asked. "For the week," she replied. He nodded. There was no tension in the exchange, no unresolved argument waiting to surface, only the absence of what had once existed. "I've been thinking about what you said," he said. Bridget did not ask which part. "About silence," he added. She waited. "I thought it meant distance," he said, "or indifference." Bridget met his gaze. "It can," she said. The answer did not contradict him. "But it didn't," he continued. "No," she said. He nodded once slowly. "I didn't understand that," he said. Bridget did not respond. Not because there was nothing to say, because understanding once reached does not require reinforcement. "I hope—" Jayden stopped recalibrating. "I hope things are stable." The word was chosen carefully. "They are," Bridget said. The answer was accurate. Jayden nodded again. There was nothing more to add. They did not extend the conversation. They did not revisit the past. They acknowledged the present, then moved on. Chloe did not re-enter the narrative. Not because she could not, because she did not. Her world continued along a different axis, one that did not intersect with Bridget's again. The environment she chose, the connections she maintained, the strategies she employed, each aligned with a version of control that existed within her own structure. But the absence of one system does not create space for another identical one to take its place. It creates difference. And difference, once recognized, alters behavior. She no longer initiated contact without context. She no longer assumed silence meant vulnerability. The lesson did not arrive through confrontation. It arrived through outcome. Bridget's final act within the structure that had once defined her personal life was not dramatic. It was administrative. A final review of documents stored within her system. Files categorized under a case that no longer required active monitoring. Financial records, message logs, behavioral notes, each item preserved not for future use, but for completion of process. She did not delete them immediately. She archived them, because systems once built are not dismantled without intention. Weeks later, she returned to the folder, opened it, reviewed the contents one last time. Not for verification, for closure. Then she moved the entire archive into long-term storage. Not erased, not active, complete. One evening, as the light outside shifted into that familiar muted blue, Bridget stood by the window again. Same position, the same angle, the same controlled environment. But the system that once required silent reinforcement no longer existed in the same form. A phone rested on the table. No unread messages. No notification requiring classification. No external variable demanding immediate assessment. The silence held, not as absence, as stability. She turned away from the window, abruptly, not finale, with continuation. The house remained. The room. And that more than anything else required no answer. In the end, nothing in Bridget Ross's story demanded. There were no public victories, voices, no final confrontation that reshaped the scene. What existed instead, something quiet. She did not win by speaking loud. She did not regain control by forcing it on. She observed. She recorded. She waited until the structure revealed itself fully, so every action, every inconsistency, and over the aligned into something that no longer required interpretation. And then she acted. Emotionally, possibly, but with precision. The kind of precision that does not seek validation. It does not debate. There is a difference between silence, between stillness, and between someone who says nothing because they have nothing to say, and someone who says nothing because they are already ahead. Bridget never needed to explain this. Because the system she spoke. And when it was over, she did not say goodbye. Instead, if you've ever seen silence misunderstood, or strength mistaken, you all what are you reaching for? What time is it? And if stories like this resonate with you, giving each children a home, you're welcome to stay a little longer.